Okay, everybody, welcome to this short tutorial and introduction to JavaScript and jQuery. JavaScript is just another language of the web, and I know we've already talked about HTML and CSS, but you can do a whole lot in terms of functionality and animation and a whole lot of other things with JavaScript that you can't really do with HTML. I'm sure you guys have seen the drop-down menus and animations for slideshows and all those kinds of things. And just to give you an example, the Masscom website has a lot of JavaScript happening. You can see that all these fonts are controlled by style sheets, but then also we've got these drop-down menus that are happening. We've got this slider that's going back and forth. And so basically what that's doing is accessing a whole lot of code that people have already written and is allowing us to view this web page in a little bit different manner than, a little bit more interactive manner than we're used to. So all these sliders that are going through here, any of these drop down menus, that's all using JavaScript, and it's something that you guys are going to get an introduction to today. So basically, what we're going to do is I'm going to have you guys go to the course outline page. So if you click on course outline and then scroll down to the July 26th here, you'll see the photo slideshow files. All I want you to do is just click on that, and it should save it in your downloads folder. Just go ahead and save that. It's going to be a zip folder, and you should have some experience with that. Just go ahead and open up that zipped file. It should be called photo_slideshow. You can click on it, or you could right click and save that onto your desktop or something. This went into my downloads folder, so I'm just going to go ahead and open it up and just kind of look and see what's inside there. So you're going to see some files that are opened up. The first that you'll see is the CSS file, and in that you've got a style sheet called global.css. It's pretty common of a style sheet. Then you've got an image folder, img, and so this is where all of your images right now are gonna go. You don't have any of your own images in there yet, but that's what so far you'll see on a web page. And then you've got a JS folder. Any guesses as to what that is? Well, it is a JavaScript folder. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and you can see there is JavaScript written here, and I'm just going to open that up really quick with TextEdit. You don't need Dreamweaver for this at all, but if you want to use it, that's fine too. So basically what you'll see here in the JavaScript file, you can just open it up just like you can with an HTML file or a CSS file, but you'll see, wow, that is a lot of code that you probably don't know. And so this is kind of where the lines start to blur between HTML and CSS and like computer programming, where people will sit and be able to program certain things. It's kind of those lines are kind of blurring a little bit. But there is some CSS in here, some things that you might recognize, like this display block. You might recognize that from the CSS, from your style sheets that you've seen. But anyway, this is JavaScript that was written by somebody else, not me, not anybody that I even know, by this guy Nathan Searles. He wrote it and he provided it for anyone to use if they want to. So what that's going to do is that's going to kind of power our slideshow. And now I'm going to open up the index page with TextEdit just so you can kind of see what's going on here. And when I open it up, you'll notice that it's telling the browser what language it is and saying it's HTML, and then it's going to go ahead to the head. And remember that we talked about most of what you see is going to be in the body, but most of what you don't see is going to be in the head. And all the JavaScript that we're going to be using that I'm selecting here, that is all head content, and that's something that we're not really going to see. It's all code behind the scenes that's happening. So if I scroll up here, everything that's blue that's selected is pretty much mostly JavaScript. The first line here is telling it to access what's called a jQuery library, and jQuery is it's a library of JavaScript that's already been written by some coders that were much smarter than myself, and they allow, it's an open source and completely free for anybody to use. for us to use their library for our purposes. And so that's what's great about JavaScript, is that people wrote a lot of code already for us, and so we just kind of have to edit it. Now this line of code, you'll see it's again accessing a JavaScript, but this here, you'll see that it's in a JS / slides.min.jquery.js. And if you remember from our style sheet, and you can see it up here as well, it's accessing a folder called CSS/, and this is accessing a folder called JS/. And so when I open up my folder here, that is referring to this file in here called slides.min.jquery.js, and that is in a folder just like my images are, just like my CSS is. It's got its own JavaScript folder, and that's what it's accessing here. So it's looking for that file right here. And then right here is some more code that's giving us a little bit of access to, I would say, a really easy way to start editing our slideshow. And I know you guys haven't seen that yet, but we'll take a look at that here in a minute. Then as you scroll down, you'll see the body, and this is all content that you should be able to recognize at this point. Some of the divs are a little bit different. For example, here's a div called slideshow title, and that, again, all of our divs are outlined in the style sheet, the CSS. And so we're not going to do a whole lot with the CSS, although right now, but later when we get back to class, I'm going to have you guys do some more customization with the CSS. But I just want you to be aware of all of these divs that are in here. Don't really mess with those other than the content. You know, like something like an H2. Obviously, instead of having a title/theme of your slideshow, you want this to say something like my trip to Korea. And so continuing on here, we've got some divs. Here is a container div, and inside of that container div we've got a slides div, and inside of that div we've got a slides container div, and inside of that we've got another slide div. And so there's lots of divs happening here, but what you'll notice is that they repeat again and again. And we talked about in class how classes instead of IDs are a little bit different, and so we can use classes, div classes, again and again. And you'll see that since we're using a lot of different images here within the same slideshow, there's going to be a lot of repeated code that's happening. And so this first slide, you'll see that, okay, here's a class equals slide. It's referencing this slide1.jpg, which should be located in your images folder. And then it's continuing telling where to find that source, where to find the image, and when to display it, and exactly how large it needs to be. And in class, I know that I talked about making sure that our width is defined, but here they also define their height, and that's going to help us a lot when we start editing these files for Photoshop, and we allow them to be displayed on the web page, because they have to be these exact dimensions in order to fit. Because the div itself, the class, you see how it says here, div class equals slide? Well, that div is only a specific dimension, and so these images need to fit inside that dimension. So then you'll see alt text right here, slide 1 alt text. Obviously that's not going to say that in a minute here. And then you've got your div class caption, and this is a little div. Everything that's in blue here is a caption div, and so all of our captions, we're going to have a different caption for each photo. And that's going to repeat again and again. So everything that I selected in blue, that's one slide. Now the next slide is basically the exact same thing, but now we're accessing slide2.jpg, and we're giving it slide 2 alt text, and then we're giving it caption for slide 2. Same with slide 3, slide 4. And so it might get a little bit tricky just trying to keep track of the exact lines of code here, because they could pretty easily get meshed together if you're not careful. But basically you'll just realize that this repeats again and again and again all the way to the very bottom, where now it's accessing our previous and next buttons, and then at the very bottom we have another div called main, and that is going to give us I want you to write a couple paragraphs on your slideshow, and that's going to happen, and that's going to show up on every single page. And so enough code, let me just show you what this looks like. I know you can get bogged down with too much code here, so let's take another look at our downloads folder. And I'm going to access those files as soon as my little wheel stops spinning. And I'm going to my downloads folder. And one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this slideshow and I'm going to name it something else. And this is something we did with our project 3s, where it was named something like top or side. And all I want you to do is just rename it something simpler than photo_slideshow. I'm just going to call it slideshow. You might want to call it Korea. Obviously you're probably not going to do one on Korea, but this is a little bit of my trip. I'm going to take it, I'm going to copy it. Well, I'm just going to drag it to my desktop. That way it's pretty easy to access, and you might want to do that as well, and you'll see it here. I called it slideshow. So let me go ahead and access that. Let me access my index page, and when I open it up, you'll see, remember when I changed that? My trip to Korea. There it is. It was in an H2. And then it's got these back buttons, the previous buttons, and remember when I said those images had a very specific dimension? Well, that's going to fit right within this div. That's why it had to be a certain dimension, because it's going to fit in this, what looks like a Polaroid kind of art behind it. And then each photo is going to have its own little dot. And right now nothing's working. And the reason nothing's working is because my files that it's accessing, when I look at my code, I'm going to scroll down here, and what it's looking at is it's looking for a slide called slide 1. And that doesn't exist yet. It says file not found. There's a good reason for that. I have not put any files into that folder yet. It's accessing this image folder, and there's no slide 1 in here for it to find. So what I'm going to have you guys do is I want you guys to take 3 photos and optimize them in Photoshop so that they match those specifications, and then I want you to upload everything to tracks. And basically by the end of this tutorial I want you guys to have 3 working photos in your slideshow. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that right now. So the very first thing that I need to do is I need to go find some images to put in this folder, and depending on your topic, that is going to be up to your discretion, whatever photos you want to use, but I do want you to somehow tell a story with this. And so it shouldn't just be random photos that you found on the web. It should in some way tell a story. And I had some photos that I'm going to go ahead and open, just put them on my desktop, and these are images that are not necessarily optimized for the web yet. I'm just going to open them up just so you can see how that process works. And these are just some photos that I took of some signs that I was quite proud of when I saw them there in Korea. This one says 11th, and it's referring to I guess what place that she is in her rocket. I'm not sure, but she's in 11th place. So what I need to do is I need to crop this and make it able to fit in my slideshow. And so I'm going to go up to my image, and I know you probably can't see this, but I'm going to go to image, and remember it was image size. And then I can look and see. And so I want to make sure that this image is 72 pixels per inch. That is correct, so that's good. But I want to make it a certain width and a certain height. Now I could do that here, and that would be totally fine. If I'm going to go back into my file here, I want to know how big that was, and so I'm going to go and open this back up in TextEdit, and my index page tells me, if I scroll down here to these images, that my image needs to be a width of 576 and a height of 432. So that's 576 pixels by 432 pixels. So now I need to go back into Photoshop and make it 576. Oh dear, what happens when you do that? Well, it's trying to constrain the proportions, and so this is not the proportions that are in my index page are for a landscape photograph, and the one that I'm editing is not landscape. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to cancel this. I don't really want to do that, but one really helpful tool that I use a lot in Photoshop is this crop tool. And so when I go into Photoshop, you'll see that my crop tool, I click on that, and I'm sorry you can barely see that, but up in the top it'll give you a width and a height, a very specific width and height, and I can just literally tell it right here, 576 pixels by 432 at a resolution of 72 pixels per inch, and now I can basically draw a box of how big it needs to be, and it's going to snap to exactly how large it needs to be, which is great. So then I can crop it and move that around, and it's going to be a little bit different because this is Photoshop CS5, and I think Photoshop CS6 is a little bit different. This is just one way to do it, but basically you need to get your image down to 576 by 432. I'm going to press enter, and now I'm going to go ahead and file, save for web and devices. Now I'm going to save this as a JPEG. I'll go ahead and save that there, and I'm going to navigate to my desktop, and then I'm going to put it in my slideshow folder, and then I'm going to put it in my image folder, just so that I can find it. Now I need to know what to save it as, and so since this will be my first slide, I need to go back to my, wherever it may be, my text edit, and I need to know where to put this thing. And it's telling me, okay, I need to put it in my image folder. That's right. Now I need to call it slide 1. Now you can call it slide 1 if you want to, or you can call it something else, but just know that whatever you call it, you need to make sure that you code it in that exact same way as well. So instead of calling this slide 1, I'm going to call this rocket, because this is a girl in this rocket. Go ahead and save that, and there it is. Now I'm still with my original photo, and again, you don't want to save the original photograph because you might want to go back in and change it later. So I'm just going to go ahead and X out of this, but not save. Now I've got a couple more photos that I'm going to do the exact same thing here. This is for Muscat Gummy Candy, which says, its translucent color so alluring and taste and aroma so gentle and mellow offer admiring feelings of a graceful lady. Enjoy soft and juicy. So that is quite the sales pitch, but I'm going to take this, and in the exact same way that I cropped the other one, I just cropped it here. Let me go to File, Save for Web and Devices, all over again, save it as candy.jpg, and now this last one, again with my crop tool, I've got it listed right here, 576 by 432. This one is some modern poetry. When they arrived the Cheshire, the wave recite a story. The windy remind them of emotional memory. After moment, they begin to write a reminiscence. So I'm not sure if you have ever written a reminiscence, but it's pretty poetic. I'm going to go ahead and auto-tone that because it's a little dark. Auto contrast, and these are some things that I showed you in class, just to take a photo and make it a little bit easier to look at. So I'm going to grab that, crop it again, press enter, file, save for web and devices, and I'm going to call this one poetry. Now these are pretty random photos, I realize that, but I would like you guys to tell a story with yours, and if I was doing more than just signs, I would probably tell a better story. But anyway, those are now all saved in my images folder. Notice I have a poetry, rocket, and candy, and those are the 3 photos that I took. Now the rest of these are photos, you know, these little dots, those were for my photos. This is the loading screen. I've got a frame, and these are all just photos that index page was using. So I've got 3 photos, candy, poetry, rocket. Now it's time to go back into my text editor and name this first slide. Instead of slide 1, I'm going to call it candy. And again, I'm going to change this here, candy. It's not just changing the link to it, like those little dots. Every time you clicked on one of those dots, it brought up the candy, but then it needs to show which photo to display, and it is a width of 576 by 432, so that's all correct. Now I need to give it some alt text, and I'm going to write down, this is some candy I found at a market, and that is alt text. That can be up or lower, and now here's some more caption. Again, I'm basically the same thing. This is some candy I found at a Korean market, and somebody told me that was actually Japanese, so guess you can probably find that anywhere. Another one I'm going to write is poetry, and let me change this to poetry, and just notice all I'm really doing is changing some text. Poetry, and I'm not really coding a whole lot here. And here is a wall of poetry for your viewing pleasure. And now the third slide is going to be called, if I can even remember, is Rocket. Rocket. And I'm going to call this Rocket. I mean, she was in a rocket, right? Or was that a plane? I'm not sure. This woman finished in 11th place. And it auto-corrected, but that's not what I want. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Just File Save or Command S. And now if I go back into those files which are on my desktop, when I open it up, it should let me, come on, let's see, it was called Slideshow, and now when I open it up in, alright, it works in my browser. So it's got 1, 2, 3, and you'll notice these captions pop up at the bottom, and as I click through them, it gives me a caption down here. So, alright, we're getting there. So I definitely want you guys to make sure that you have 3 photos, the first 3 are working, and give it a header, which is an H2. Make sure that H2 says something not the title of my slideshow. Change the home, I'm sorry, not the home, the title up at the top. Go ahead and open this back up in TextEdit. So I'm going to change my title as well up here in the head title. Instead of the title of your slideshow, I'm going to call it johnsmickley.com photo slideshow of Korea. Something very simple. And now, one last thing I want you to do is to take a look again at the JavaScript. And once you've uploaded your 3 photos and they're working, I want you to go ahead and look at this in your head of your index page, and you'll see that there's some options that you can edit. And right now there's not a whole lot you can do with it, but there are a few options here that I want you guys to change a little bit. And so what it's saying is it's playing each one of these photos for 10,000 milliseconds. And so convert it into something that you can fathom a little bit easier. That's basically 10 seconds. So it's going to play for 10 seconds. And you'll notice that when I click here, it's going to just kind of sit there for about 10 seconds. And after a while, then it's going to move to the next. It should, anyway. There it goes. Okay, so that was 10 seconds. Now, what you can do is you can change that to 5 seconds if you want to. So instead of 10,000, it's going to be 5,000. Another thing you could do is pause it if you wanted to pause it for 2.5 seconds. There is a fade button here, and another option that you can type is slide. And so that when, instead of fading from one to the other, now it can slide from one to the other. See how they slide instead of fade. So that's another option that you can change it to. And then you can change the fade speed. So right now it's at 1 second fade speed. If I wanted that to fade a little bit slower, I could do that by making it, maybe I want to make it a little faster to 500 as opposed to 1,000. So I want you to edit some of those things and at least take a look at the JavaScript and be able to navigate your way around it and kind of know what's going on there. And so when you're finished with all that, again, when you've made your 3 photos and you've optimized them for the web, making them with a width and a height that is defined here, and then you have told those images where to go exactly, and given it alt text and caption text, and then and that works, and the H2 is changed as well as your JavaScript. I want you to save everything, and there's 2 ways you could submit this. You can either grab this whole entire folder that you made, mine's called slideshow, and you can turn it into a zip by just clicking compress, right clicking and clicking on compress. I think Windows computers might say something else. Either way, I want you to somehow compress it into a zip folder, zip file. You can see when I do it, it's called slideshow.zip. And then upload that to Dropbox, or you can load them file by file onto Dropbox. And so I would recommend you to turn them into a zip folder, but if you just can't do that, then I want you to upload all of your files to the Dropbox. So that is it for the tutorial. Hope you learned a little bit about JavaScript and jQuery, and we will continue this project in class on Monday when we meet. All right.